You hear that music? If you know, you know. It's Doug Ellin, the creator of Entourage. All right, Doug Ellin, the creator of Entourage. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. What's happening?
Well, I'm excited to have you on as a longtime fan of Entourage and now a new fan of Victory, the podcast, which I like the merch you're rocking right now, supporting it. And
I gotta spread the word,
Yeah, I mean, you guys have been doing a great job. I think for people that don't know, it's you, it's Kevin Connolly, Kevin Dillon, which is E in drama, the main characters or the main cast of that podcast.
Yeah,
and it's like reliving the thing.
Yeah, and we've had everybody else come on, and we talk about the show obviously, but I think you get the vibe that the behind the scenes was similar to what was on the camera, so it kind of feels like an hour hanging out with your friends. So.
Well, that was my first thought, was listening to the podcast. Like, wow, you guys actually have like a family rapport going on. So it makes sense how well the cast vibed actually on the show.
Yeah, we got very lucky. I mean, when I was casting, I was looking for people that would kind of be like the guys I grew up with, and I got lucky to find them. So it took off from minute one that they just had that chemistry, and they were all authentic New Yorkers, which was important to me so I could really get that vibe that I was looking for.
Yeah, so we'll get into your backstory in a minute, but I think the first question that everyone is wanting answered, that I know you've talked about, but we have to ask: is there going to be a reboot, a second movie, or an Ari Gold spinoff?
Definitely not a second movie. Definitely not an Ari Gold spinoff. But I mean, when we started the podcast, I had no interest in even revisiting Entourage at all. But it's been so much fun hanging with these guys, and the reaction has been so positive that I guess anything is possible. I mean, it's not something I'm really thinking about, but everything else seems to be getting rebooted. So if HBO calls, I'm not going to ignore the call, but it's not something that's in like high on my mind. And like I said, we're doing stuff in the podcast, which obviously it's different, and we don't get to do all the pizzazz that we did on the show, but it kind of has the vibe of the show, and we're going to start releasing videos of it, which will be cool. And we're going to start shooting kind of additional content, and we bring in so many of the cast members. Everybody's been on it. Jeremy Piven, Jerry Ferrara, Constance Zimmer, Andrew Dice Clay, Larry Charles, etc. So, it kind of feels like the show to me without all of the grinding hard work of actually making a television show,
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the great thing about podcasts is, you just hit record and you can do a lot with it. And you guys have done a great job with, I think you started out with kind of running through the episodes, but now it's taken on a life of its own. It's almost more than that. It's a peek behind the scenes of what it was like on set.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about the show, but we talk about everything, our lives, our careers. So it is three New Yorkers in Hollywood who've had 30 years of experience, and we talk about our personal lives, divorces, etc., our children, everything like that. So it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah. So, all right, let's start back from the beginning here. I know you got to LA in the early 90s, think with just a blank slate, didn't know anybody, if I'm getting this right, stand-up comic. How do you go from that to creating probably the greatest comedy of all time?
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. But there was a lot in between that. I mean, I graduated Tulane University in New Orleans, and I moved out here and didn't know anybody. I started doing stand-up and getting temp jobs, made a couple of short films, and I went to AFI, which is the American Film Institute. And when I came out, I made another short film. Then I got offered, my first working job. I got paid $10,000 to go, rewrite and direct this $100,000 movie called Fat Beach, which ultimately ended up getting released on 400 screens around the world and still plays on Showtime to this day, which was a movie we shot in like 9 days when I was 22 years old. And that led to the next feature I did, which was called Kissing a Fool, which was also an independent movie, which Universal Studios picked up and released. So I had been working in this town for about 10 years prior to Entourage. And, that came about. My friend from college was also Mark Wahlberg's manager, but I was also friendly with Mark. And, they had been kicking around the idea of doing something about Mark and his friends, and brought it to me and said, "What do you think?" Which when it started, I said, "I don't like it at all, actually." But my producer, manager, friend said, "You'll figure it out." And that's kind of when I spoke to Mark and said, "I really need to, kind of take in your life, but really, if I'm going to be able to find what this is, it's got to be more about what I know." So that's why we moved it from New York to Boston, that these guys were New Yorkers. And then it went from there.
Yeah, so I think it's such a foreign concept from people who are outside, where okay, you just get approached by Mark Wahlberg, "Hey, do you want to work on this?" Where do you go from there? Is it you guys pitch HBO? Did they reach out to you? Like, how does that whole process work?
No, I mean, as big as movie star as Mark is and was, no, HBO was the king of the mountain at that point. There was nothing else. There was no Amazon. There was no Netflix. There was no Hulu. So we went and pitched to them, and they bought the script, which means they pay me a pretty little amount of money, and then tortured me for about 2 years before they finally agreed to make it. And even after that, it was another 6 months before they agreed to pick it up. Then they ordered 7 more episodes. So from the time we first talked about it to the time it actually aired was close to 3 years.
Is that I would imagine that's a pretty stressful period.
Yeah, I mean, listen, this town is always stressful, and again, looking back, when we sold it to HBO, that was like the greatest feeling in the world. We thought we made it, or again, this is separate from Mark, because Mark had already made it. But that is such a early part of the process, and you go through so much between then and getting on the air and then staying on the air. So yeah, it's all a stressful process. And obviously the 8 years in the movie we did was a great run, but it's always a hard work and a grind.
Yeah, how much of those 3 years was you proactively rewriting the script and doing actual tweaks on the product that you put on the screen versus kind of the informal things? Like, I would imagine there's like politics of getting a movie made. I mean, everything I know from about Hollywood is basically learned from Entourage. So that's a later question I have, is how realistic is it? But how much of that is really improving it versus trying to catch a break?
I mean, to be honest with you, I probably did 50 different passes of it. But that being said, in 3 years, how much time and work is that? I'll do a pass. I'll send it to HBO. I won't hear a word for a month. So we'll just be sitting there waiting to see if anyone even read it. And that's kind of the hurry up and wait system of Hollywood. Once you get picked up and the money starts rolling, then it's like, okay, deadlines, deadlines, deadlines. But HBO, I don't think, had high hopes for it from the beginning. And they were certainly in no rush. So they were willing to take as much time as needed, which, for us was obviously frustrating, but ultimately it all worked. So,
Yeah. What was the difference in terms of your command? Like, how did you feel in terms of your command on set and bringing an episode to the air from episode 1 to, season 8? Was it, you started off as a rookie and then you're the old gnarly pro at the end?
yeah. No, I mean, to be honest with you, I never felt much different. Set was always a very comfortable place to me. And, I feel if you get on a set with the right actors and the right script, it's not that it's easy. It's a lot of work and you have the right crew, but that was always smooth. The difficult process, which never got easier, was the writing process, getting the scripts done and ready, coming up with new ideas. And, as I said, the pilot took almost 3 years. And when they picked us up for 7, I was like, I don't know what the fuck this show is. I have no idea what the next episode is, and I had never worked on a television show. I mean, I worked on the Bonnie Hunt show for about 3 weeks, but I'd never really worked on a television show. And as much as I love television and watch television, the idea of coming up with stories that can continue for 8 years was so foreign to me. And so that was the difficult part. And it didn't get easier. It's not like by season 8, I was like, oh, this is easy, I'll just phone it in. But set was always a kind of great place to be, and where a lot of great things happened. And but the script is where it all starts and is the key to everything that does happen. And that was the thing I was really obsessive about, you know?
Well, I think you guys obviously nailed the dialogue. I mean, I don't know that there's a more quotable show than Entourage, but the thing that's also impressive is the story really runs through. Well, I do have to give you a hard time about the fact that Dana had a kid and then didn't have a kid. I have to give you a hard time about that.
Yeah, you know, I talk about this on the podcast, but you know, my brain is like a disorganized mess, and there are so many things. It looks so simple when someone does it, like David Simon, The Wire, who wrote like a 75-page Bible, which my agent gave me when I was pitching Entourage. He said, "This is what sold The Wire." And I looked at this thing. I was like, I can't fucking do this. What are you, out of your mind? Like, this is like, you know, brilliant novel writing. I don't know how to do that. So me, it was very much made up as I went along. And the writers I worked with, I used to go home, write 15 pages and bring it in and let them read it and give me thoughts. And they'd be like, well, where's it going? I'm like, I don't know. Let's figure it out, which is not a good way to work for anybody, but it was just the way it worked for me. And things like children disappearing or things like that, I changed things that worked for the stories at the time. I mean, Vince and Drama shared a father when we started, but I wanted to do an episode where the mothers all showed up on a plane. I didn't think the fathers getting off the plane would be as emotional, so I changed it. And, you know, I never thought about, oh, people are going to look back and look at all this stuff and go, what the hell happened? But they weren't things that I wasn't aware of. They were just things that I just didn't care to spend my time on. I preferred to just make the episode that was happening in front of me as good as possible. So,
well, I mean, it's a good problem to have, right? If you have fans that are loyal enough to notice that stuff, then obviously it's a bit of a compliment.
Yeah, no, it's definitely great, but it also is remarkable when I do watch the stuff of the detailed kind of stuff that, you know, David Simon was able to do, but it's just a different thing. And, you know, my son ended up playing Ari's son. So he wasn't even old enough to speak when we started, but then he would hang around set and everyone's like, he's got to be Ari's son. And I'm like, all right, well, I'm not going to not make him Ari's son because I had some kids walking around his house 2 seasons ago. So those things just kind of went. And, you know, there were arguments with people that I worked with. And I was like, I don't give a shit. Like, they can all go crazy or whatever they want. And, you know, it would have been interesting if the internet was really active back then, whether people would have been up in arms about it while it was on the air.
Oh, yeah.
But it's funny to me now, 15 years after we started or more even, to get all the DMs I get. Some of them are like, you think it's amusing. Some of them are, you're a fucking idiot. How did you get this job? You're a moron, you know? So all of those things are funny.
You also based a ton of the characters on real life Hollywood figures. So obviously Ari, based on Ari Emanuel, and the one I think you guys look like geniuses for just making Harvey Weinstein look like a total dick.
Yeah. Well, to be honest with you, you know, some people are like, where was the sexual harassment, raping, whatever stuff? I didn't know
because that was
anything
an
about.
open secret.
You know what? I never heard anything about that. So, you know, whatever. But I had interacted with Harvey. I wrote a script for Harvey, and he was just a complete douchebag. So my experiences were based on what I knew personally and firsthand. So, and what happened with Harvey, which is funny, we did the first episode, and then it was like New Year's Eve, which, you know, as I say, the grind is real. New Year's Eve, my family was in Hawaii. I was sitting in my office by myself trying to figure out what the next episode was. And Kevin Connolly called me, who played Eric, and he said, yo, I was just at this bar. I ran into Harvey Weinstein. He said he's going to kill you. I'm like, and Harvey Weinstein was a big, crazy fucking guy. And I was like, he's going to kill me. He's like, yeah, he saw the episode. He said, you're fucking dead. And Connolly's a tough, scrappy guy. But I'm like, okay, whatever. And he's like, the guy is fucking unhinged. So I came up with the next episode where Harvey basically takes the knife to E and is like, I kill people. And so that's where it came from. And then, even though I still hate Harvey, Ari and Harvey called me after that episode aired, and he was like, that one was funny. So whatever. He liked that. But by the way, Harvey still owes me 50 grand for a script that I wrote that he just never paid. And
I don't know if you're going to get that one.
Yeah, I don't think so. But hopefully he enjoys his time in jail. So
Ari Emanuel called you up and with Harvey, and he was like, that was funny. I feel like you were probably the most feared and loved guy in Hollywood at one point, right? Like nobody wanted to be the bad guy in your show, and everybody probably wanted a cameo.
Everybody did want a cameo, which was cool. By season 3, we couldn't get anyone like season 1. 2, it started opening up a little bit, but there was not a lot of, even though some people say that, there was not a lot of mean-spiritedness in the show. Even the Harvey thing, again, I thought he was a bully. I had no idea about the real stuff, but it wasn't meant to be like a horrific portrayal of him. It was meant to be funny, and a couple of shots we did take at people on the show were usually for personal reasons, not just random, like, let's abuse somebody. So
you got an example?
I mean, there's a ton, but Stephen Dorff, Kevin Connolly had a problem with him. I mean, I actually wrote this line because Rob Weiss, who was my friend from high school, who was a writer on the show, had a problem with Kevin Smith. So I wrote this line about Kevin Smith, but then Kevin Connolly was like, yo, I want to change it to Stephen Dorff. And I was like, Kevin Smith was huge at the time. Stephen Dorff was a great actor. I'm like, I don't think anyone is going to know who Stephen Dorff is. The line was like, he could close a movie quicker than Stephen Dorff. And Connolly's like, trust me, they'll know what it is. I'm like, all right. So we said that line, and Entertainment Weekly put it in as the quote of the week. And all of a sudden I was hearing all these messages. Stephen Dorff wanted to kill me. Good luck. But that was a personal problem he had with Kevin. To be honest, I don't even remember what it was, but that's how that happened. But very rarely did we just randomly go after somebody,
Yeah. What about the cameo side? Who were the best cameos that you had? I know you had Gronk on there in the movie and Brady. So maybe you deserve a little credit for the Super Bowl, but
yeah, it's wild to think when I had Brady on. I think when we had Brady on, he only had 3 Super Bowls, and he was like the GOAT. And still before this one, people were debating, is he the best ever? It's so stupid. But the cameos were just an amazing thing for my life. I mean, reality of Mark Wahlberg's existence is, he calls me up and says, bring the movie over. We'll watch it at my house. And I walk in and Kevin Durant is there. Steph Curry's there. This one's there. That's like normal life for his life. So some people used to say, why so many cameos? That was why, because it was realistic. But also to me, when these types of people became fans of the show, whether it was LeBron James or Tom Brady or Gronk. I mean, Gronk told me, he told his friends in high school that he was going to be on Entourage, and they told him he was an idiot. And to me, it's like, besides making me feel like, how the fuck did I get old out of nowhere? It's an amazing thing to me. I was a kid who grew up, and I was never good enough to be or even dream about being a professional athlete. But I admired those guys and loved their talents and their work ethics. And then at the same time, to be able to get the filmmakers that I grew up idolizing, Martin Scorsese and Frank Darabont, Peter Jackson, James Cameron. It was just a really incredible time,
Yeah, absolutely. Is it Scorsese or Scorsese? Doesn't he say that?
A lot of people say Scorsese. I've said Scorsese since I'm a kid. I'm
right.
continuing
Yeah,
to say it until he tells me. I was so nervous when he was on the set. I actually did want to say, okay, Mr. Scorsese or Scorsese, but I didn't say it. But I do believe you're correct.
Yeah, he what do you think about his comments, by the way, as an aside? He just put out that he's talking about how he doesn't like the fact that all the studios do is optimize for content. Did you see that?
I didn't see it. I know He said something about the superhero movies, but I didn't see this new thing. But what I'll say about Scorsese is anything he says, I'm on his team. I mean, he
Yeah.
really is, without, besides being, in my opinion, the best American filmmaker of the last 50 years. Cameron also right there. But he knows more about film and movies than probably any person on the planet Earth. And I think he's been fortunate that he kind of gets to make these artistic movies that have now become commercial, because even when Goodfellas was coming out, it wasn't really like a commercial hit, but The Irishman and obviously Wolf of Wall Street. But I just I love the man, and respect anything he has to say about the film business.
Yeah, you really can't go wrong with anything he does. It reminds me, I heard on, I think on your last podcast, you were talking about how you guys actually cut film in Entourage. You were
Like,
cutting like the physical film.
well, we shot on film, but no, we even season 1 we cut digitally. I was probably talking about my first short film, like in my apartment, which I cut on film. But no,
Okay, I thought you were
Entourage,
talking about the movie.
we shot Entourage on film, which most things shoot digital now. But no, we cut digitally.
Okay, what's the advantage of doing it on film? I've always wondered that.
I mean, the biggest, whether you would call it an advantage or not, is, in my opinion, you can make it look better. You can make it look different ways. And my cinematographer, a guy named Steven Fierberg, who's just a brilliant cinematographer, it was important to both of us that we shot on film. It's old school and whatever. It makes things slightly more challenging to do. And look, it's hopefully it doesn't evaporate completely. It's an art form that I grew up loving, and digital keeps getting better and better. And there are things that make life far easier when you're shooting digitally, but I still am old school and love film.
Well, my affinity for film comes completely from the Billy Walsh cutting Medi and having the film everywhere, and my dumb brain is like, oh, that's amazing, like that's how it should be done. That's a real filmmaker right there.
And that was based on, I mean, that's reality to any filmmaker 20 years ago. But my first short film I cut in my apartment like that. And my roommate, there were film strips everywhere. And the fact that a movie could even get edited like that is so mind-boggling, that you could now do it on your iPhone in 14 seconds. What would take professionals and, expensive equipment. It's amazing what technology has done, but is still something special about that. And, Billy Walsh kind of, was that character that I could give that old school vibe to really loving the, traditions.
I did want to ask you before we get on another topic, when we're still on the reality of the show here, the kind of the power dynamics of the agency and Ari Gold. How realistic is that? From everything from the guys pushing the mail carts, like they're coming out from Ivy League schools just delivering mail, and then the fact that you have Ari negotiating for different clients, like leveraging them, stuff like that. Like how realistic is all that stuff?
I mean, especially when the show was on the air, I mean, it was unbelievably realistic. And I didn't go to an Ivy League school, but I was one of those people pushing a mail cart around. Worked in the New Line Cinema mailroom. I actually had a situation where I ended up leaving that mailroom that was similar to what I portrayed on the show, where Ari got in a fight with the mailroom guy, even though it was the wrong guy. Obviously, it was slightly changed, but one of the best things or compliments for me on Entourage was this town loved it, because they believed it really showed the realistic side of Hollywood. And the amount of agents back then that would tell me, this is how I explain to people what I actually do. I tell them to watch the show. And the most important thing to me in the show from day one was be realistic. And even if some people didn't understand it, we'd say inside terms, you could figure it out or not. And again, 2003, when we started, there's no TMZ. Hollywood is a little still behind the curtains, whereas now you can, be with a movie star like Vince on his Instagram all day and watch stuff like this. So, but it was really important to me that we got it right and that we were realistic. And, some people started to say the show, oh, nothing bad happens, there's some bullshit. But those were the realistic ways of a movie star having a career. And yes, some crash and burn and never heard from again, but that usually doesn't happen. It's usually more like Mark's career, which there's a couple of bumps, but ultimately he's, still on top.
I think the most frustrating thing was when Vince refused to do Matterhorn. It was like, bro, just do that for like 6 months or whatever it is. Get your 10 million and then do your passion project.
Yeah. Well, it's in real life. That's the tricky thing, because you can talk to any movie star. We had James Caan. Hopefully you know who that is. I hope.
Yeah.
But James Caan, who's an Academy Award nominated actor, Sonny Corleone from The Godfather and a million other movies. Sadly, more people probably know him from Elf at this point. But, his son was also on the show, Scott Caan, who's on Hawaii Five-O, played Scott Lavin. But we talked with him on the podcast about the movies he passed on, and you don't know. So all you have is your instinct of, I don't like this. So of course you wouldn't pass on it if you knew it was going to be, Titanic. But, a lot of times you don't know that. And that's why movie stars like Leo are smart enough to go, I'm working with the best, because they rarely fail. And I'm not going to go take chances on some young kid who may have some talent. So, but I think the idea of really being able to know what a hit movie is a very tricky thing. And a lot of movies that people thought were going to be hits weren't. And a lot of movies people had no idea were going to be worse. So,
well, to push back, I mean, Vince didn't even read the script. So,
which was also based on reality. And it was not Mark, but the New York Times wrote an article about that. Like, I think they were like, does Mark Wahlberg really not read his scripts? Because I would always say everything was really real, and it was, but it wasn't based on Mark. But that was based on a real movie star that I know clearly. His whole team used to come over and have to read him the scripts because he used to fall asleep reading them, So all of the stuff that may seem to some people like, come on, it was based on something,
Yeah, for sure. Let's switch gears for a second. Where do you see the kind of the state of comedy in the world today? I mean, I think that, a lot of the stuff in Entourage would be questionable today, but look, it's still hilarious. And I personally think people are a little bit too soft these days, but are you worried about the state of comedy as someone who has contributed so much to the role of comedy?
No, I mean, the world always adapts. Eddie Murphy was like my idol growing up, and you watch Eddie Murphy's old stand-up shows that were the biggest things on the planet Earth in 1982. And you'll go, holy shit. I mean, I can't believe this was on the air. So things adjust and people adjust. And I, without getting into politics of it, trying to rewrite history is dangerous and stupid. And everybody should learn from it, and everybody should appreciate, including, by the way, one of the most annoying things to me is like, oh, could Entourage be on today? Could Sopranos? He's allowed to fucking murder his son's father's friend. That's okay. But Ari can't, say something abusive to someone in office. The difference is right now, if you abuse someone in the office, it's going to get out there and you're probably going to get fired. So if we were doing Entourage today, I would do this. I would start the exact same way. How is this going to be realistic for now? And you obviously hope it lasts forever, but people will have to look back at it. And some of my favorite movies of all time, there are things you look back at now that make you go, holy shit. But, that's how the world changes. And hopefully, look, I want the world to get to be a better place. But I didn't invent the world of douchebag agents who scream at people, who abuse people. And I've never abused anyone in my workplace. So they're characters. And when people talk to me about that or call the show whatever they want, misogynistic or this and that, I just think they're fucking morons. So
yeah, well, it's art, right? I mean, you can portray something without endorsing it. And a lot of those lines with Ari, yeah, I mean, you're totally right. I mean, I just watched Caddyshack a couple weeks ago, rewatched that.
Yeah.
and it would probably not fly. All in the Family, saw an episode of that recently. Probably not fly
Well, look,
today.
All in the Family, was showing a mirror of what America was. And
Right.
an ignorant guy who didn't understand, who needed to be educated. And that's why that show was so brilliant, because it did have a giant message underneath it. Entourage was not supposed to be a message. If it was about loyalty and respect. And even Ari, who abused the shit out of Lloyd, he loved the guy and would do anything for him. He just had a big mouth. And again, you can say, and plenty of people will, well, that's not the way to talk to people. And okay, that's fine. Well, tell Ari and tell the real Ari, and I'm sure the real Ari has adjusted his behavior in the workplace, just as I'm sure many others have as well. But as we see in the paper, humans are fucking humans. And I'm not going to judge it because I don't know the story yet, but Governor Cuomo is all over the papers today for sexually harassing, some person who worked for him. And those things are going to happen. And I just find, just because it's a comedy, whatever, which I thought it was a dramedy, but, just because it's a comedy doesn't mean you can't accurately portray things. And I think you cannot like a character. So, go back and say, I don't like Ari Gold if you don't want to. But when they come after writing or they come after the thing, I just find it stupid,
Well, comedy is absolutely one of the best formats to advance a critique of society. Who's the guy that was the showrunner for All in the Family? Norman Lear. Norman Lear. Yeah.
Norman Lear, whose niece actually worked on Entourage, Sophia, and I think I named a character after her, but Norman Lear, who's one of, who's alive and well, is one of the great geniuses of all time. And, that show, like I said, was just a brilliant reflection of society. Today, it's hard to imagine someone being that ignorant, but back then, there really was. People were so segregated and so separated, they didn't understand it. And that was what, while being brilliantly funny, it was actually trying to teach people to, be kinder, be more thoughtful. I wasn't trying to teach anybody anything. I was just trying to reflect, on what it was,
Well, to close this segment, at the end of the day, all the guys on Entourage were good guys.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I think that's the thing. That was the thing about when Vince took the left turn into doing hard drugs. It was like, first of all, that was a little bit of surprise, but then the big thing was all of his boys were genuinely there for him when he did that, right?
I mean, that's what the show was about. That's how I sold it. I said, Hollywood's the backdrop. This show's about friendship and loyalty. That's why I say these fucking people who come out and have their stupid comments, even fucking Mindy Kaling, this loudmouth who used to say all this negative shit about us. We were nominated for an Emmy and a Golden Globe and a Writers Guild Award every single year. The New York Times said we were the smartest show on television in 2003. People look back and go, what? That's what the New York Times said in 2003. Smartest show on television. And then people revise history and want to write stuff. The truth is, I was extremely careful with those guys. Vince and E never said even sexually vulgar stuff about women. Turtle and Drama, who never got women, would make the locker room kind of comments and this and that. But that being said, they were never overtly rude to women or abusive to anybody. So again, it's it's obviously, I've talked about this a lot, but it's just kind of nonsense. And the world always needs to improve. And right now we're going through one of those hyper times where corrections happen, and that's fine. They overcorrect, and people learn to adapt, and then you get back into it. And then there are the people, which I believe at the time I was one of them, who was at the forefront of what we were doing. But there's always people who figured how to walk those lines and actually still do great comedy like Chappelle, but move the narrative forward of what culture should be like and why people can think certain things aren't appropriate that you would have not thought about at a certain point in time.
Yeah, I totally agree. There's no need to try to rewrite history or relitigate it. It is what it is. It's a great show. If you don't want to watch it, don't watch it. Yep. I think it's as simple as that. I know you got to wrap up here soon. I have a question from a friend who's also a big fan of the show, which was, what was it like working with Gary Busey?
Challenging. Gary, I love Gary, but he's also on the podcast. You should check out that episode. But challenging to do the podcast with him as well. But Gary came in, the show, as all the actors talk about on the podcast, the show was 97% on the page. The improvisations were few and far between. Larry David was on the show, who I gave him an idea for a scene, but basically improvised the scene. Gary Busey did the same thing. A couple of my lines made it in somewhere, but he told me, like, I won't give you your words, I'll give you the truth. And Gary would, you ask what the difference between film and digital is. Film is expensive. It's expensive to purchase. It's expensive to process. You also have 10-minute mags that run out. And Gary would go on for an hour. And like, I had producers going, we're gonna run out of money if we don't get this stuff. But we just used to shoot and shoot and shoot, and then we'd get in the editing room and we'd find magic, because he is got a genius inside of him. But he was a challenge for sure.
Busey and the Beach, what an episode.
Yeah.
So was Larry David one of your inspirations, in Seinfeld too?
Yeah. I mean, Seinfeld, I wanted to be a comic when I started. Jerry was like my, Jerry Seinfeld, Eddie Murphy, Richard Pryor. And Larry, obviously, I didn't know really till Seinfeld, but Seinfeld was my, benchmark of the best sitcoms ever made. And when he did Curb, Entourage happened because I wrote a Curb spec when I thought, after my movie came out and didn't do well, and I thought my career was over, someone said to get into TV. They said, write a spec for your favorite show. I wrote a Curb spec, which it's nuts that the show is still on the air. And that's what I did.
And it's still good, too.
And it's still great. And Larry's a friend now. And we were lucky enough to get him on the show because Larry Charles, who was executive producer of Seinfeld, got him on. But of all the cameos that were on my show, that was the one that I was really intimidated by. Me. Larry Charles told me, he doesn't want a script. He just wants an idea. And when we were on the set, Larry Charles and Larry David were talking, and I'm highly involved with everything, but I was kind of just sitting back because I didn't want to bother them, I was just like waiting, and I was nervous as shit. I'm like, this is like two of the great comic minds of our generation, but I had a very simple fix, and I was like, I walked over, and I was so fucking nervous, and I'm like, guys, what if it's just this? And Larry David looked at me, and I thought he was mocking me. He's like, that'll work. And I was like, okay. And then he just did the scene. But, he became a friend of mine at my 35th birthday party. I had a surprise party, and I walk in, and now my friend from high school there, he's like, Larry David's here. And I'm like, Larry David's here? And Larry goes, why wouldn't I be here? He's like standing right next to me. And, yeah, he's, of course, one of my inspirations, and Seinfeld and Curb are two of my favorite shows of all time. And just a brilliant mind, and a guy I love. I love when I see him in life, and I love when I watch him on whatever he's doing.
Is he exactly like what he is in Curb in real life?
I mean, I'm not going to sit here and pretend to know him that well, but what I know of him, he's identical. I mean, what I know of him, that is him, but a good guy, and gets the joke. I don't think he's an angry guy. I think he gets his shtick, and I think he makes the most of it, but he's funny as hell. And,
yeah, he is. He definitely gets it. I think in terms of the comedy thing, one of the best scenes to describe kind of this backlash was the I'm sure you're familiar with this, where he calls the other poker player, the guy, the C word at the table, and they all freak out on him. Yeah. What a good distillation.
Well, yeah, well, he does it like Chappelle. He walks that line that I try my best to I try to stay out of it, because it won't come off from me the way it does from them. And that's part of their genius. They're able to go into those situations. And I'm trying to think of the kind of Me Too thing he did last year? I can't remember when it was on last, where, he's with that girl and they're kissing, and he wants her on video to, to give him permission to do whatever he does. And, I really can't say it enough. He's a fucking genius. You know, he really is. He's one of the great American treasures, of my life. So,
well, my last question for you to kind of put you on the spot, and then I want to give you a chance to plug your new show, which I heard about Thierry Henry.
yeah.
But the last question here, a bit of a Mount Rushmore, since you've met all of these people on the show, is, and definitely putting you on the spot, most interesting person, smartest person, most intimidating, and funniest.
You know, we're talking like Larry David, my favorite comic personality. Martin Scorsese, my favorite filmmaker. James Cameron, my favorite filmmaker of that kind of giant, incredible movie. Tom Brady, U2, my favorite band. It's like the Yankees. I shot in Yankee Stadium. I had my children and everyone I grew up with, 100 people in the stands as I controlled Yankee Stadium for 3 hours, thanks to Mark Teixeira, who was the first baseman for the Yankees. So there were so many incredible experiences. And like I said, I don't know why it was. Larry David was probably the most intimidating, and James Cameron. And, James Cameron played a joke on me. I got to set, and just getting him, which we talk about on Victory the podcast, but just getting him was incredible and early on, which was made it more mind-boggling. But I got to the set and everybody's like, yo, Mr. Cameron's freaking out. I'm like, why? They're like, he says the script sucks. And I'm like, okay. I mean, he's had it for a couple of weeks, but all right. And I take a golf cart and he's sitting around. There's 50 people standing around while he's going, who wrote this shit? Blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, it was like 6:30 in the morning. I'm like, I can't fucking believe this is happening. And I'm like, sir, is everything all right? And he tried to like yell at me and he just started laughing and the whole crew just busted out laughing. And just that kind of stuff to have. And to have James Cameron tell me, comes out of his trailer where he's acting. He's not an actor and he's enjoying this, having a good time. And he goes, and I still don't know if he was slightly mocking me or not, but he goes, how do you write this stuff? It's so like real and natural. And I'm writing these blue people, because he was writing Avatar, like in the trailer while we were shooting. And I didn't know, to this day, I don't know if he was serious or not, but being around those types of people was an amazing thrill. And the fact that they liked the show and were willing to do it because of that obviously makes it even more exciting,
I mean, I'll definitely accept that as an answer. That's that's a great way to put it. All right, well, let's obviously Entourage will never be replaced, as you just described in that last answer. But tell us about the new show.
So new show, which it's early on. As I said in the process, I'm writing scripts right now. We're trying to cast over Zoom in London. I haven't even met the people live that I'm working with besides Thierry and his manager. It is, it's of course going to be compared to Entourage in some way, but it is set in Premier League football, loosely inspired by Thierry Henry's life. And it's called Day Ones, and it's got the same types of themes about friendship, loyalty, and family. But as I said, it'll be the 2021 version, and it'll be no more PC than that show was then, but it'll be realistic to what the times are now, But like I said, though,
tracking the life of a EPL player.
It's him and his crew, and there's women in it, his mother, his sister, and I used to say this about Entourage. I can't stand describing the show Entourage, because even when it was pitched to me by Mark, to me it sounded like shit. Oh, it's a movie star and his friends. So this is, you can say it's a football player and his family. But what makes a show work is characters and execution of storyline and casting. So that's what we're doing right now. And I think if we get it right, it'll be a great vibe. There's not a lot of what I look for on TV, which is, wish fulfillment and an escape, which, is what we try to do on the podcast too. It's not taking itself too seriously. And hopefully you'll get that vibe that if this was you and your family and you could be in fantasy land, that's what you would do. So that's the plan.
Perfect. I can't wait. All right, Doug. Man. Well, thanks for coming on.
Yep. Be good. Take care.
And there you have it. There was Doug Ellin, the creator of Entourage. Thanks for coming on, Doug. It was a pleasure speaking with him. I had a friend ask me, how does he fit into what I'm going for with the narrative monopoly? And the answer is very simple. That conversation that you heard was not a conversation that would happen if he were to be interviewed by someone in the narrative monopoly. And so it's just a laid back conversation with someone who knows a lot about the show. I think that overall, if we have more interviews conducted by people who are not out to get the interviewee and who know about the subject matter, I think overall will be a lot better. And so that's how it fits in. Another good one coming up next week, and hope you hit subscribe and rate 5 stars. Thanks.